President Obama is urging people of faith to love and respect Muslims. It's his second such outreach in as many days, and it comes as critics point to the latest news on the struggle against radical Islam, suggesting both a lack of attention and a lack of results.
Faith is the great cure for fear.
One day after making an historic visit to a Baltimore mosque, President Obama today used his speech at the National Prayer Breakfast to again deliver a message of religious inclusivity.
Fear can lead us to lash out against those who are different, or lead us to try to get some sinister other under control.
The president making a veiled reference to what the White House has called divisive rhetoric on the presidential campaign trail, including calls from GOP frontrunner Donald Trump to temporarily halt accepting Muslim refugees until they can be properly vetted.
Refugees fleeing from a war-torn home, terrorism, eroding shorelines, those things are real.
The anti-Islamization and anti-migrant movement Pegida is staging International Action Day today in various places. Over a dozen rallies are underway, in fact, across Europe, including in the French town of Calais, which hosts that large makeshift camp, the Jungle. A number of Pegida's supporters have been arrested at the rally there. This video shows the arrest of one of the protesters, reportedly a French army general and former advisor to 3 French prime ministers. Public demonstrations are actually currently banned in Calais right now. For more on today's other Pegida rallies in Europe, RT's Lizzie Phelan and Harry Fear report from Germany and the UK.
The issue of migration and also the so-called Islamization of Britain is on the minds of protesters here today. And I caught up earlier with the new leader of Pegida in the UK, Tommy Robinson, and asked him about the group's latest ideological stance towards Birmingham.
It's the first real Pegida UK rally. It's part of the simultaneous rallies across Europe to raise awareness, bring about debate and try and wake people up to what's happening.
And what is happening?
Islam is invading Europe in an uncontrollable way. It's getting an ever-growing influence in our country. It has our politicians in fear, paralysed with fear. No one dare talk about it or tell the truth.
The mayor of the small German town of Bad Schalma has incurred the wrath of residents for suggesting that they should avoid provoking newly arrived migrants.
Etwas leicht bekleidet sind. Ist das
Ganz einfach, indem wir doch nicht provozieren, dort nicht entlangfällt.
In sein eigenes Land! In seine eigene Stadt darf man nicht mehr! Geh bloß nach Hause, Junge! Wer hat dich denn gewählt? Die kommen hierher und wir dürfen nicht mehr lang gehen!
Meanwhile, videos emerged online allegedly showing a group of young migrants attacking 2 elderly men in Munich. The person who posted on Facebook says the altercation began when the pensioner stepped in to try to defend a young woman from the migrants. That's the allegation. He says the video was recorded on one of the city's underground trains.
A general alert was issued at Madrid Barajas Airport shortly after midday on Thursday, after the captain of a Saudi Airlines plane announced the flight had received a bomb threat. The alert was made public at 12:45 local time after a crew member on flight SVA 226, which was due to fly from the Spanish capital to Riyadh, discovered a note with message "Bomb aboard 11:30" pinned to a door on one of the luggage racks shortly before takeoff. The plane was taken to a secure zone of the airport, and the 97 passengers were evacuated at around 1 p.m. to allow the aircraft to be searched by explosive detection teams. The message was proved to be a false alarm after a search. The alert was cancelled.
Turning overseas, there was a bang and suddenly a gaping hole in a jetliner over war-torn Somalia today. And Margaret Brennan has that.
Cell phone video shot on the plane while still in flight shows oxygen masks blowing in the wind near the hole in the Airbus 321. Some passengers towards the back of the plane can be seen wearing their own oxygen masks. Once on the ground, the damage to the plane was clearly visible, with pieces of the fuselage curled out from the body of the plane. All 74 passengers and crew were evacuated. Aviation officials say 2 people were injured.
The signing of one of the biggest trade deals in history has sparked a wave of protests. The fear is that the pact will grant sweeping powers to big business. The Trans-Pacific Partnership Agreement includes 12 countries and must now be ratified before it can come into force. There were some arrests outside the signing ceremony in Auckland in New Zealand. It's a big deal as well. It covers some 40% of the world's economy. And the aim is it'll create an EU-style free trade zone by slashing thousands of tariffs between the signatory countries. Well, all well and good, but not everyone can be a winner, of course. Here's what some of the experts are saying might be the outcome. The treaty could have a devastating impact on the workforce, according to a report by some American economists. They say that the US will be the hardest hit, losing almost 500,000 jobs, while other countries in the agreement will only see, quote, negligible gains. Totally, job losses among the 12 nations could reach almost 800,000. The deal's also been slammed for a lack of transparency.
There are about 40 cities in the United States that will be protesting tomorrow, as well as protests in 7 other countries. So no, this is not the end of protest. In fact, what it seems to be is an escalation of protests. People are now facing the reality that they're going forward with this global corporate coup that gives all power to corporations and takes power from the people and undermines democratic institutions.
TGIF, everybody. I wanted to stop by because, as you're aware by now, America's businesses created another 158,000 jobs last month. After reaching 10% in 2009, the unemployment rate has now fallen to 4.9%, even as more Americans joined the job market last month. So this is the first time that the unemployment rate has dipped below 5% in almost 8 years. Americans are working.
Violence has broken out again in Athens. Clashes between police and protesters angry at government pension reforms erupted throughout the city on a day when many other Greeks were staying at home, marking the country's second nationwide walkout in a year. The protests had begun peacefully as thousands demanded an end to austerity. The government says pension reforms are needed to meet the demands of international creditors, but the message on these signs and from protesters is clear. Our lives and our future do not fit with their measures.
These measures cannot be borne. How can people shoulder this pension burden? It's just not possible.
With 40 years of work, I get a pension of 740 euros per month. That's why they should be hanged at the square. We should hang them today.
The Russian Defense Ministry warning that Turkey could be preparing for an invasion of Syria.
We have grounds to suspect Turkey is gearing up for an invasion. We have traced growing signs of stealth preparations by Turkish troops for military action in Syria.
Russia says Saudi Arabia's proposed troop deployment in Syria could be regarded as a declaration of war. The head of the State Duma Committee, Pavel Krashenikov, says Riyadh has to get official permission from the Syrian government before any military operation in the Arab country. But unlike Russia, the United States has welcomed the Saudi offer to send ground troops into Syria. The U.S. Defense Secretary Ashton Carter says the offer will be discussed with his Saudi counterpart in Brussels next week. Saudi Arabia has announced it is ready to join the so-called U.S.-led coalition against Daesh. Damascus accuses Saudi Arabia, Turkey and Qatar of funding and arming anti-Syria terror groups, including Daesh.
One by one, rescuers are searching through toppled buildings looking for survivors of a strong earthquake in southern Taiwan. The 6.4 magnitude quake shook the city of Tainan. 2 large buildings, including a high-rise apartment building, collapsed, and others were toppled as well.
Storm that is sweeping across the country. More tornadoes touching down in the southeast Wednesday. And then take a look at this surveillance video from a high school in Tennessee. The school damaged by the storm.
A tornado warning has been issued.
For the second night in a row, tornadoes rain down on families in parts of the South.
It looks like it's almost splitting into 2.
This one was recorded on cell phones, tearing through Fort Stewart, Georgia, the U.S. military base near Savannah. Sirens and warnings blared on loudspeakers.
Abandoned vehicles and trailers.
Frightened parents and children couldn't believe their eyes.
Oh my God, taking the roof off houses.
This morning, the base says it has to move 50 people to new homes. Dozens of vehicles are destroyed. And in South Carolina,
you better run.
There were reports of tornadoes there too. And it wasn't just the high winds. The storm brought heavy rain, lots of it.
The will to live kept her hanging on.
In Nashville and Atlanta, drivers had to be rescued from flash floods. And take a look at this video from a surveillance camera that they gave us at Crockett County High in Tennessee. This is near that coach's office. You can see the moment a tornado tore through this school Tuesday.
Everybody was gone home, and that saved lives.
Yes, no doubt.
They're working through the night, and they hope to have classes open back up by Monday.
A volcano has erupted in southern Japan in dramatic fashion, causing a lockdown of the local area. The Sakurajima volcano erupted at 7 p.m. local time. Authorities have issued a level 3 warning, banning entry as lava flowed down the mountain. So far, there have been no injuries reported. Well, the very active volcano is located on one of Japan's smaller southern islands, just 50 kilometers away from the Sendai nuclear power plant. But no immediate warnings have been issued. The plant was the first to restart operations after a shutdown of all nuclear reactors in Japan following, of course, the Fukushima nuclear disaster in 2011. That tragedy, almost 5 years ago now, started with a magnitude 9 earthquake, which in turn triggered a tsunami with waves up to 40 meters high.
We're now all familiar with the Porter Ranch methane leak health symptoms: dizziness, nausea, vomiting, even reports of skin allergies. These are all symptoms that people who live in the community and its surrounding cities are reporting to health officials in droves. But it's other family members who may be the most easily affected by this leak and are also the most underreported. Those are the pets of Porter Ranch. David Smith is a leading veterinarian in the city and says that the furry family members in Porter Ranch may actually be the ones suffering the most.
The mercaptans are there for safety reasons, so you can detect the odor in case there's a leak in your house or nearby, so you can get away from it. Those are apparently, at least they're saying that's the main ingredient that's causing nausea and some of the other problems. We're seeing a lot of vomiting and gastrointestinal distress in dogs and pancreatitis. Tons of pancreatitis cases, interestingly enough. So somehow it's irritating the pancreas, something is. And they usually come in because they're throwing up.
Smith has been practicing in the community for more than 20 years and has never seen anything like this. Animals being treated for vomiting, nosebleeds, bronchial problems, and vision issues being brought in by distraught owners at a rate of 20 times more than usual.
Breaking headline today in New York City. The image of the deadly crane collapse not far from the World Trade Center. One person was killed, several injured, people trapped in their cars.
Tonight, a crawler crane upside down, the monster of a machine capable of lifting 330 tons, crashing down in 30 seconds of terror. That moment caught on tape.
There he goes, he's moving fast now, he's dropping it really quick. Whoa!
Pure steel, more than 50 stories tall.
It's falling, it's falling, it's falling.
Suddenly collapsing right onto cars on the road.
Oh, it broke! Holy!
TMZ video showing people nearby rushing to help that man inside.
Keep going, keep going!
I saw the crane coming down, and when it came down, it made a loud noise and it hit. Then we all ran to see if we could help out.
At least 3 injured, but on the street, a 38-year-old Wall Street worker, David Wicks, killed. Officials say crane operators were trying to secure the crane because of wind and snow.
And this incident occurred literally as they were lowering the crane to secure it.
From this 5th-story window, you can see that crane right there. It was being used to replace generators and air conditioners right on the roof of this building behind me.
The crane sending debris everywhere, bricks scattered, and in this roof, a hole from a piece of equipment crashing through, ending up here on a desk. For much of the day, a threat of gas leaks.
It's a cold New Hampshire morning as the Manchester SWAT team quietly moves into position.
Successful breach.
Within minutes, 2 suspected drug dealers are arrested and taken into custody.
We're at war with the drug cartels and the drug deals, not only this city, but in the nation.
The raid is part of a federal, state, and local operation called Granite Hammer. Its goal, stemming the heroin epidemic ravaging New Hampshire, where Manchester police say every 5 days someone dies of an overdose, usually heroin.
5 years ago in 2010, in this city, we seized less than 200 grams of heroin in 1 year. Now, fast forward to 2015, we took over 27,000 grams of heroin off the street.
The heroin crisis has become a key issue for the presidential candidates.
We can't be here in New Hampshire and not talk about the addiction problem.
It is a crisis.
It's a horrible disease.
That wall is going to stop so much of it.
And it's weighing on voters' minds here in New Hampshire.
Red team moving to position.
Another home, another raid.
The SWAT team is executing a search warrant on the 2nd floor, an apartment where a man is suspected of dealing drugs. The sun is barely even up, and surveillance suggests that people, possibly buyers, have been going in and out of that apartment for the last couple of hours.
To understand the reach of the heroin epidemic, all you have to do is look at this map.
This really shows what amounts to the poisoning of America.
It does. It's and what's represented here is wherever you see orange, is the Sinaloa cartel's influence in the United States.
Michael Ferguson is the special agent in charge of New England for the Drug Enforcement Administration, DEA for short.
Every city and town, there's a heroin epidemic going on today.
I'm looking at this, it's like a virus that's just spreading.
It is a public safety, public health, it's a national security situation.
Zimbabwe has declared a state of disaster in most rural areas of that country hit by a severe drought. Public Works Minister said the number of people requiring food aid has risen to nearly 2.5 million, which is 26% of the population. The official said all 60 rural districts of Zimbabwe are affected by the crisis. The African nation has suffered perennial shortages in recent years and has resorted to importing grain from neighboring countries to meet its needs. A regional drought worsened by the El Niño weather phenomenon has affected South Africa and Zambia as well as Zimbabwe, leaving tens of thousands of cattle dead, dams depleted, and crops written off. Mr. Powers, thanks for joining us. How do you feel about what are the root causes here? Is it just El Niño, or is there some mismanagement here as well?
Well, I think there's obviously there's mismanagement from previous 15 years destabilizing the farm industry in Zimbabwe, which was primarily owned by whites because of black empowerment. Robert Mugabe removed many of the white farms But I also want to speculate a little bit and wonder if there's some sort of weather modification attack being done on this region of Africa. We can always blame Mother Nature, but strategically, these regions, there is a bigger play to keep Africa poor and under control. We saw that with the now revelation that indeed they did kill Muammar Gaddafi of Libya because of his plans to transform Africa.
Ida Ahmed Qayaad waxaan ka imanay bariweyn 9 bilood 8 iyo 10 geedi baan soo guuray adduunyada ilmaa 200 baan ariga lahaa dameeraha 7 baan lahaa looda 5 iyo 10 neef iyo inta ka badan baan lahaa neefkii dameeraha yar halka ku keenay ubadka oo u kala jeedinay halkaana noloshu way nagu qabatay dawladdu way nagu soo gaadhay
أنا وين نسيين نيو بوليس كعيدمادي وباركا waa noo keeneen waa dambas maxaa u nool dadka kale waxna soo maray doona anagu aragnay maaha way kay weligeed bayna la mid ahayn waa laba abaarood bay abaartii la mid weligii caalamka dad inta la eego kale soo degay ma jiro abaar ka soo dhacda
Concerns now about that virus growing right here in the U.S. The governor of Florida now expanding that state of emergency to 5 counties. And there are now more than 50 cases of the virus across 13 states and Washington, D.C. ABC's Lindsay Janis has the latest.
This morning, Florida preparing for the worst, declaring a public health emergency in 5 counties. There are now 12 travel-related cases of Zika reported throughout the state. Governor Rick Scott calling on the CDC to provide at least 1,000 Zika antibody test kits for pregnant women to see if they contracted the virus in the past, and thousands more kits to test for active cases.
The mosquito that causes Zika virus is common in Florida.
The spread of the virus, a growing concern for the estimated 20 million tourists expected to visit Florida in the spring break months. And at Miami International Airport, hundreds of flights a day coming in from the 30 high-risk countries flagged by the CDC. Over 100 of them just from Brazil.
And ground zero for the outbreak, Brazil is struggling to contain it, with prominent voices now calling for this summer's Rio Olympics to be canceled. Our Dr. Richard Besser is on the scene in Brazil right now. Good morning, Rich.
Good morning, George. Every 4 years we look forward to the Olympic Games and the world coming together. But this year it's different, and that's why health officials are so concerned. Because when the world comes together during a viral epidemic, when people go home, they may not go home alone. With millions of tourists in Rio for the start of Brazil's Carnival tomorrow, and millions more expected this summer for the Olympic Games, controlling the Zika crisis here is more urgent than ever. Overnight, Brazil's president saying the virus has gone from a distant nightmare to a real threat. The government scrambling to start developing a vaccine. But until one is ready, she says, mosquito prevention is their best course of action. Now this morning, some who doubt whether Brazil can get Zika under control by this summer are calling for the Rio Olympics to be canceled.
I don't know that it's up to doing the Olympics and epidemic control at the same time. Mosquitoes are a tougher problem.
A person in Texas has become infected with the Zika virus through sexual contact. The unidentified person has not traveled to the affected areas, but had sex with a person who returned from Venezuela with the illness. The Centers for Disease Control has confirmed the lab test results, and Dallas County health officials are following these developments. The CDC will issue guidance in the coming days on prevention of sexual transmission of the Zika virus. This is considered the first case of the illness being transmitted within the United States.
There's some new troubling information on the Zika virus. Reuters reports Brazil's government health institute found active Zika virus in saliva and urine samples. More on this from Sanjay Gupta.
Worrying, isn't it?
Well, we knew that this could be in bodily fluids other than blood. That's been shown because it's been sexually transmitted. So it's not entirely surprising that we're going to find this in other places as well. The big question, and we don't know the answer to this yet, is can it be spread this way?
WHO officials on Tuesday expressed concern that Zika virus could hit Africa and Asia as well.
The potential for spread, not just across Latin America, but into Africa, into Asia, which have the highest birth rates in the world. We don't have a commercially available diagnostic test.
That means many women could have been exposed to Zika virus, but there's no way to know who is infected.
Zika virus cases may have reached Europe and Portugal. 5 people tested positive after recent trips to Brazil. Authorities are keeping a close eye on these developments. CCTV's Dan Williams reports from Lisbon.
The Zika virus has exploded across the Americas and has been linked to thousands of babies being born with microcephaly, a congenital malformation that sees babies born with underdeveloped brains. Events in Brazil are watched closely in Portugal, given the close ties between the countries. But the concern is also shifting closer to home after 5 people tested positive for the virus after recent trips to Brazil. Vitor Lett of the Portuguese Institute of Hygiene and Tropical Diseases says the developments are alarming.
The great pressure is about the capacity of the virus to disseminate through a vast territory. So it's a real concern. The concern is real, and then the dissemination of the disease here in this European territory. But
the infectious disease wards of hospitals across Ukraine are almost packed as flu has engulfed the country. Over 3.2 million people have fallen sick since September. The epidemic became the deadliest in recent years, with the death toll nearing 200.
The number of incidents is growing in the western regions, which had lower illness frequency at the start of the epidemics. That shows that infectious diseases do not have borders.
None of the dead was vaccinated against the flu. Most of those died from the H1N1 type, dubbed the swine flu, which causes severe forms of pneumonia if it is not dealt with immediately.
The death toll from the H1N1 virus or the swine flu has risen to 7 in Georgia, the country's National Center for Disease Control said on Wednesday. In addition, another person was killed by the mutated flu virus H3N2. The Disease Control Center said the level of flu activity has decreased and it remains below the epidemic threshold. Georgia reported the first death from the H1N1 virus this year on January 17th. Russia and Ukraine have also been hit by an influenza epidemic, which has caused dozens of deaths during the ongoing cold season.
Pope Francis, we hear, will hold an historic meeting with the Russian Orthodox Patriarch Kirill in Cuba next week. It's crucial it's a big thing. It's the first meeting of its kind since Western and Eastern Christianity split in the 11th century, something known as the Great Schism. RT's Daniel Hawkins reports.
Meetings between top-level spiritual leaders are not uncommon, but what makes this one unique is, of course, it's the first time that the Pope, the head of the Roman Catholic Church, over 1 billion followers worldwide, will meet the Patriarch, the head of the Russian Orthodox Church, around 150 million followers, the biggest denomination in Eastern Orthodox Christianity. Now, what makes this so important is that it's the first step towards the warming of relations between these two religious groups, which really have some fundamental differences in how they look at theology and biblical matters. And secondly, it signifies perhaps a first step in a more accepting an inclusive atmosphere from these two churches, whereby the Russian Orthodox Church and the Catholic Church can cooperate as equal partners on an equal footing on a global level for the first time in hundreds and hundreds of years. The timing of this meeting is also quite salient. We've got a quote here from the foreign policy chief of the Russian Orthodox Church, the Christ of the Saviour Cathedral here behind me, one of the key landmarks of Eastern Orthodox Christianity. The foreign policy chief, the Metropolitan Ilarion, he said that now with the persecution and what he calls the genocide of Christians in the Middle East, in North and Central Africa, as well as other regions, is not the time for internal disputes, for arguments and bickering. Now is the time to put aside differences and show unity in the face of these global challenges. So very much a call for a united front, if you like, from the leadership of the Russian Orthodox Church, especially at a time when the relations between East and West are, to put it mildly, very tense. This is certainly a step forward in these relations, and perhaps we can say the politicians could take a leaf out of their spiritual counterparts' books in also showing some global unity here.